Thank you. And let us begin our prayer.
Guide our feet while we run this race. Guide our feet while we run this race. Guide our feet while we run this race. For we don't want to run this race in vain. Guide our feet while we run this race. Guide our feet while we run this race. Guide our feet while we run this race. For we don't want to run this race in vain. Guide our feet while we run this race. Guide our feet while we run this race. Guide our feet while we run this race. For we don't want to run this race in vain.
And we ask our God to guide our hearts while we run this race as well. And listen to this wisdom, which comes to us from Alice Walker. The time of the lone wolf, capitalism, for instance, is indeed over. It cannot possibly sustain itself without gobbling up this world. That is what we see all around us. Women and children in Bangladesh, India, the Philippines, Haiti, Mexico, China, and everywhere else in the world are forced into starvation and slavery as they turn out the tennis balls and cheap sneakers for the affluent. Ancient trees are leveled to make housing, while housing that could be saved and reused is torn down. Communities are heartlessly displaced. Mining of the earth, the very saleable substance she has, fouling the waters in her blood, murdering innocents, whether people, animals, or plants, in pursuit of oil. The lone wolf is a hungry ghost that can never get enough. whose mouth may be small, but whose stomach is boundless. We cannot afford him.
The time for the lone wolf is over. Gather yourselves. Banish the word struggle from your attitude. We are the ones we've been waiting for. And let us say, Amen. Here for the second day of this two-part session is Brienne Moyer. Welcome, Brienne.
Thank you. Thank you for having me back. And really, thank you for sharing this quote from Alice Walker to really kick us off, because I think it just really will tie in so perfectly with what we're going to be discussing in today's session. So just as a reminder for folks, even though I am hopeful that we have retention from everybody who joined yesterday. People are back today. Yesterday, we spent a lot of time just really going over some of the crises that we are currently navigating here in the United States, and then talking about how the Poor People's Campaign can be a vehicle for building power among the poor and dispossessed in the United States and even globally, and become that new and unsettling force to win change in communities that we really crave. And so today I wanted to focus on one element of the Poor People's Campaign, and in particular, this is the work that we do around the evil of ecological devastation. So I'm going to start by bringing up my PowerPoint presentation. Oh, I'm sorry, Marty, would you mind sharing co-host permissions with me so I can screen share? Thank you. Okay. But just a reminder from yesterday. So we did, of course, acknowledge that the Poor People's Campaign has been forged to really tackle what we've identified as the four interlocking evils, being systemic racism, poverty and inequality, ecological devastation, and our war economy and militarism. But since this is a space that was created to talk specifically about like environmental racism and possibly the climate crisis, I want to spend today focusing more on these issues. And so first, I just want to remind everybody of the demands that the Poor People's Campaign has around ecological devastation. You did hear these, not in a very explicit way, but that video that I shared at the end of my presentation yesterday ran through all of the demands that the Poor People's Campaign has. And so I just want to once again emphasize the demands related to ecological devastation. This will be really important when you get into your breakout sessions and work through some of the discussion questions I have for you today. And so the demands that the Poor People's Campaign has with ecological devastation are, we demand 100% clean, renewable energy and a public jobs program to transition to a green economy that will put millions of people in sustainable living wage jobs. We demand fully funded public water and sanitation infrastructure that keeps these utilities and services under public control and that prioritize poor, rural, and native communities that have been harmed by polluting and extractive industries. We demand a ban on fracking, mountaintop removal, coal mining, coal ash ponds, and offshore drilling. We demand a ban on all new pipelines, refineries, and coal, oil, and gas export terminals. And we demand the protection of public lands and the immediate cessation of opening up public lands for polluting and extractive industries. So I just wanted to share these demands and then also remind folks of where these demands come from, because yesterday we discussed how the campaign is anchored by 2 national organizations, but the demands didn't just come from these organizations. These actually were produced after a series of hearings where poor and dispossessed people across this country were able to share their stories and share how they were impacted by ecological devastation within their own communities. And it was through this testimony and through these experiences that the campaign was able to collectively create these demands. And that is how all of the demands that are addressing all of our interlocking evils have been forged. And so just because these demands were created through personal testimony, I wanted to spend the beginning of today actually just sharing some of the stories that people have told at the different hearings that the Poor People's Campaign has hosted throughout the nation. And so we're going to look at 4 videos today, and they're both very brief, but it's just, once again, people getting to share their own personal experience, how they've been impacted by environmental injustice or environmental racism in their community. I want folks to be able to listen for, not only the issues that people are sharing, but who is driving the harm in these communities. And so we can recognize who is it that we might be wanting to target in our own communities. I want people to listen to these stories and also hear, how is it that I see this issue showing up in my own community or my own backyard, or maybe not this issue in particular, but is something similar also happening in my community that I know that me or my congregation can be taking action around. And so just please listen with open ears, maybe take notes if you can, because what you hear in this testimony will be really critical, one, for trying to pull out what you can see in your own world right now, but then it'll be useful in informing the discussions that we're going to have later. And so I'm just going to move right on in to these videos. I did my best to try to cut out all of the songs that really cushion each video. So I'm sorry if there's a little bit of singing before we get to the speech. It just might happen.
I am with God Green. We are a people of color-led environmental justice organization based out of South Seattle. I want to give honor and thanks to the Duwamish tribe and the tribes of Coast Salish Sea, whose land we are on, because they are the original defenders of and protectors of this environment, who have been fighting for generations and years to protect the environment, but also have been using alternatives to fossil fuels before we even started doing that in the US. As a person growing up in Seattle, living here majority of my life, almost all of my life, all but 3 years, I never considered myself an environmentalist. Even though I grew up with the highway and the Nucor Steel Factory, which is a Forbes 500 company right outside my window. I had never heard about green jobs or food justice until I got involved with community organizing. But I learned that because our communities are so strong and resilient and always willing to fight for each other, this is also part of our work, is to fight for the environment, our home. Climate change is the greatest threat to racial justice and to our communities. Already, majority of the polluting industries and Superfund sites are located near Black and brown neighborhoods due to redlining and racist land use policies. As a result, people of color are more likely to have asthma and respiratory problems than white people, as well as be exposed to cancer and other health ailments, and leading to lower life expectancy rates. With the heat waves, the droughts, and the wildfires blowing smoke into our communities, it's only getting worse, and these ailments are exacerbated. Right now, Seattle is also becoming a wealthy green city for the wealthy and corporations. It is one of the top 5 cities in America with the highest concentration of rich millennials, and the recent census data shows that most of the people moving in are earning over $100,000 a year. As West Coast cities are boasting about cutting their carbon emissions and growing their local economies, housing prices and costs of food are skyrocketing, and people of color and poor people are being put out on the streets. Rapid gentrification is driving people further away from their social safety nets, the resources and services what keep them resilient. Instead, they are being pushed into EJ hotspots, flood zones, and areas with less resources. Or worse, they are becoming homeless and being exposed to the extreme weather events. And in the aftermath of climate change disasters, poor people and people of color are the ones to lose their homes and cannot return, as seen with Hurricane Katrina, Typhoon Haiyan, Superstorm Sandy, the Eastern Washington forest fires, and now Hurricane Maria. We know that our communities are resilient, and when we are kept together, and it's our neighbors and our families who take care of each other and check in on each other, not FEMA, not Red Cross, not ICE, not Seattle Police Department. It's our community. Community resilience means keeping it in the ground, and I want to give a shout out to the No DAPL Coalition and the Water Protectors. I want us to fight for a just transition, for an economy that's healthy for our people and our planet.
Okay, so that first presentation was with Jill, and now we're going to move on to our next speaker. I do encourage folks to continue to ask these questions in the chat. Like while I'm listening to the speeches, I will also do my best to respond.
My name is Olinka Green, and I'm here today to talk about environmental racism. I live in a place called Dallas, Texas. And in Dallas, Texas, we have 3 Superfund sites. A Superfund site means when an area has been declared by the United States government as toxic. We are being killed by air with the concrete batch plants. We're being killed by the water with a place called Lane Plating, where a company has been there for 90 years. And in the 90 years that they have been there, they have put cyanide, mercury, lead, hexavalent chromate, sulfur in our water and in our ground. Our children are dying. Our children are developing skin cancer. Our women are developing breast cancer. We are being attacked by the corporate Ku Klux Klan. White supremacy used to be in a sheet. Now it is wrapped up in a corporate business suit. ExxonMobil, BP Oil. Come here tonight, and we talk about white supremacy. They're not shooting us down in Walmart, they're killing us in the air. They're using a weapon that we cannot see. When they poison our water, Flint, Michigan. When they poison our air, Beaumont, Texas. When they poison our ground, Love Canal, Kentucky, Louisiana, Mississippi. That is white supremacy. It is a method. It is genocide. Because how do you kill a people if you don't know that they're being murdered? You put it in the air. So we must understand this, that we must attack this on all fronts, because our very existence is at stake. In El Paso, as I was coming through, I see the power plants. I see the power plants on the other side of your beautiful city. It is the same thing in Dallas, Texas, when you cannot go outside because of the smog in the air. We must fight environmental gay, lesbian, pink, whatever you want to. Children. And I said it again to the people here in El Paso. See, say pretty. The people united will never be defeated.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut off Alinka. Next. Now this video is a little bit different because she's not speaking at an in-person hearing. We did, this was in April of this year, we had what was going to be in person, a We Must Do More tour, ended up being like a virtual gathering online. And so we had a lot of folks sharing their testimony from their homes. And so there's a little bit of a dialogue between the speaker and Reverend Barber as well.
Hi, my name is Nikita Wakes. I live in Flint, Michigan. I am age 44 with 2 children. My life before the COVID-19 has been very stressful. It has been over 6 years, and we are still fighting for clean water here in Flint, Michigan. The lead exposure impacted my family tremendously. I lost 2 sets of twins due to drinking the contaminated water, and my daughter also miscarried. Our immune systems have been compromised already. Now we have to worry about the COVID-19. Not only am I fighting for clean water, but I'm also fighting for my son's education. My son is struggling in school. Due to the lead exposure, he's had a lot of problems in school. He's a special education student, and these schools are getting the special education money, but not providing the special education care these children need. I have been homeschooling my son for 3 years now, and ever since the Flint water crisis, because they are doing more online for special education students than they are in the Flint school system. I am currently the executive assistant of MAID Institute, and we help returning citizens and at-risk youth getting back into their communities. I'm working from home due to the COVID-19. There has been a lot of deaths that I know of, people that I know that have died from the virus, and all I can do is pray and keep moving on for my family. I have no personal transportation, so I rely on friends to take me to the stores for grocery and for massive amount of bottled water that are needed for me. Because here in Flint, we need to use bottled water for everything, washing off our vegetables, everything. We cannot drink our tap water. But now that I'm going out to the stores, the shelves are often empty of the supplies that we desperately need here in Flint. I became involved with the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival, because I felt like if everyone is fighting for some type of same systemic racism, and if we all come together, then maybe something would get done. Thank you.
Thank you for telling your truth and sharing with us that very personal piece about those 2 twins. I want to ask you really just straight up, what do you think should happen to the people from a legal standpoint who knew that they were poisoning the people of Flint? I mean, right from your heart, from your gut, when you think about the children and everybody else. Your words, not mine. What do you think?
I think everybody involved should be incarcerated. From the governor and everybody who knew about it. Everyone should be held accountable for their actions.
I asked you that because a lady yesterday who we were talking with, who's a nurse's assistant and being forced to go in and treat people without PPEs, and talked about all the people that had died who were nurses assistants. She said it clearly. What is happening in this country, the way it's treating poor people before COVID and afterwards, is nothing but a form of mass murder, and we cannot accept it any longer.
Oh, I'm sorry. I went to click the trap and then I paused it. Hold on.
Should be incarcerated. from the governor and everybody who knew about it. Everyone should be held accountable for their actions.
I asked you that because a lady yesterday who we were talking with, who's a nurse's assistant and being forced to go in and treat people without PPEs, and talked about all the people that had died who were nurses assistants. She said it clearly. What is happening in this country, the way it's treating poor people before COVID and after it, is nothing but a form of mass murder, and we cannot accept it any longer.
Oh, I guess that was actually just the conclusion of the video. I was expecting her to respond, so I must have ended it too soon, and I apologize for that. I will move to the last video that I will be showing folks before we come back to one another.
My name is John W. and I grew up in the Union Hill community. In 1963, I left Buckingham County for the military, where I joined the Air Force. And after 40 years, I returned to Buckingham County. I relocated to the property where I live now. I have a ranch, I raise cattle. The reason I returned because we have the full season that we can celebrate. The clean air, the clean water, the quietness, so much greenery, which I was used to. And I really like this community, and I like the county of Buckingham. I want to quote what great Martin Luther King Jr. said, as it pertains to the struggle we're in. A man dies when he refused to stand up for what is right. That's right. A man dies when he refused to stand up for justice. And a man dies when he refused to take a stand for that which is true. I'm here today speaking in this place at this event to stand for those same values for my community, to protect my community and its history from a toxic, polluting compressor station which will change our lives forever. The people here matter. The history of our community matter. Creation matter. Union Hill was settled by freedmen, one of whom was my ancestor. And the history should not be erased for a permit for a toxic compressor station. I have great concerns for our water. What is going to happen when the underground pipe leak? We won't be able to drink this contaminated water. What about our gardens? What about our livestock, domestic animals, and wildlife? They all need water, our most precious commodity. I'm concerned about the toxic air that we will have to breathe. These poisonous, unsafe gases will pollute this most precious air that we breathe. I'm concerned about the effects of noise, of performance, stress, behavior of animals. Noise will have on our cattle, especially newborn calves, and on our donkey. It has been proven that cattle animals hear high efficiency sound much better than humans. Can you imagine the stress it'll have on cattle on a continual basis? Can you imagine the trauma this noise will cause when the mother cow is trying to give birth? We live in an agriculture area where we raise crops, cattle, dairy cow, donkey, goats, and chicken. And we are stewards of God's earth. And we are to take care of it, not to pollute it. That's right.
So I actually would like to hear maybe from a few folks if anybody has any immediate responses to what you just saw in these videos.
This is Phyllis. It's painful. It's painful to hear how many people have suffered because of environmental degradation in their communities, and that policymakers turn a blind eye to the things that are happening.
Yes. Absolutely is painful. That's spot on. It's like we put so much faith and investment into these systems and into like our politicians who are elected to represent us, and then knowing that when we need them to step up and protect us, protect our access to clean air and water, and just everything that we need to just survive, not even thrive. I'm just talking mere survival, and they won't even do that. It's very heartbreaking to hear. Thank you for sharing that, Phyllis. I see in the chat, somebody also shared, you saw speaking truth speaking to power, or speaking truth to power, which is absolutely spot on. Is there somebody else that's trying to speak?
Yes, I would like to say, on 60 Minutes, two of the scientists said that we are too far gone almost for that it's not going to get worse.
Mm-hmm.
And it's climate change, and it's all about the money, as some of the speakers had said.
This is Barbara Bozak. I just would like to say, I guess it shocks me that we know so little about this. You know, it doesn't make the news what made the news. Most of this pollution is kept kind of silent. And although we do hear about moments where certain groups are affected more than others, it's not something that's out there and knowledge in the newspapers, on news channels, knowledge that we easily have access to.
Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of that is actually by design, Barbara. And this is something that I didn't get really a chance to talk about much, but I have like a background with a degree in communications, and in the program that I was in, like we talked a lot about how like the political economy behind media, who owns the media that we consume, and like who's the one who can like really like shape. Oops, I'm unmuted. I hope that you heard. So either way, I'll reiterate that I was saying, like, we talked a lot about who owns the media that we consume, who is like who are the people that can really determine the information that is accessible. And I think it's like very much by design that there are like major corporations in the world who are also the folks who control the major media institutions that we consume. And so it's not in their interests to highlight the ways that these same corporations inflict so much harm in our communities and to our public health. And so like it's very intentionally kept from us. That was very insightful what you just shared. I appreciate that. I did see
Karen.
I think Karen. Karen.
First of all, I thank you for that. I had the privilege of proclaiming the reading this afternoon, but one of the women, I think she was in the third video, she said they're trying to kill us. And as soon as we say that, every head shakes and goes, no, 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 we're not. But it's not trying to kill us. It's trying to fill them, whoever them is, that hungry wolf, that there is no limit. So they do not, like this, someone said a little earlier, are we beyond even redemption? Because there is not an awareness of what is happening to our brothers and sisters throughout this country by what might make me a little happier in my life for today, because tomorrow I want more.
I'd like to agree with what folks have said about the seriousness. And sometimes I think, and maybe a lot of us think, that this is all terrible and what do we do about it? And what has really struck me from what you have shared with us, Breon, is that there's an organization out there that's really organized and really has its stuff together and really knows how to do it. And that's the Poor People's Campaign. And rather than us trying to do something on our own, what would be the wisdom of us becoming involved with the Poor People's Campaign wherever we are?
And I will say that the conclusion of today is all about how everyone on this call can get connected to the Poor People's Campaign. We are like a force in almost all states, except for, let's see, 1, 2, 3, excluding 7 states in the United States. We have like coordinating committees that are doing work across the US. And so the coordinating committees, which are actually comprised of a lot of different kinds of organizations, whether it's like economic or social justice groups, religious groups. I know with our coordinating committee, we work with the Unitarian Universalist Church. And so I think like there's definitely different ways to get involved with the coordinating committees, and I'm going to speak more to taking action with the Poor People's Campaign later on. We are in Alaska. The Poor People's Campaign is in Alaska. I'm going to mention this at the end, and I'll be explicit about the states where they are not, but hopefully everybody is pretty much covered in the geography here. I do want to pivot though and create some time for people to have conversations in breakout rooms. And so I'm going to bring my presentation up again just to share the discussion questions I have for everyone. Thank you so much for all of your contributions right here in this open forum. And I think one thing that I do want to emphasize, and this is related to Karen and your response about how the policies are really set up in ways that they're like working to kill us. But you said that they're also like feeding the wolf, which also happens to be like draining us of our life source. I think that Reverend Barber this summer, when we did our like a big virtual gathering on June 20th, 2020, he talked about how policies have death measurements. And this is like what like our legislators are doing whenever they do not support measures that are like anti-poverty measures, are not about, you know, protecting our rights to a clean environment. They're therefore like building policy that has like a certain amount of death among like the general population built into it. And it's just like, we definitely have to do the work to push our policymakers to get rid of this death measurement. Like we can't, you know, exist and have these laws and different systems and policies set up in ways that are designed to let people slip through the cracks. Like, no, we have to create laws, create policies that are just fundamentally just and will support everyone. And not leave anybody behind. And so I just wanted to like be explicit about that in response to what you were saying, because I think that that's something that Reverend Barber mentioned that really resonated with me a few months ago, enough that I was able to repeat it here today. So let me go back into sharing my presentation just very briefly, because I just want to put the discussion questions on the screen, and then we will also throw these in the chat for you all. And so I was hoping that we could use the testimonies that we heard to maybe help us think through, like, how are we seeing these issues show up in our own communities? And so the discussion questions I have for folks today would be, like, what does ecological or climate devastation look like in your community? And who are the people being most impacted by these issues? Why is it important that your congregations work to center the stories and needs of the poor and dispossessed, who are on the front lines of environmental injustice? And then I started off by reading the demands around ecological devastation. I can also see if we can get those broadcasted so we can have that reminder too. But the last question being, how do our collective demands respond to the needs of your community? I think that they are comprehensive in a great sense, but there could be shortcomings in the demands that they are, as you see how they may or may not address how these issues are showing up in your own communities. And so I'm very curious to know, like, do the demands fit? What is missing? Like, should we be pushing the campaign to add some more information here? And so I will, let's see. Oopsie. I'm gonna stop the screen share. And I can put these questions in the chat. I see that Sister Carrie was working on it. Oh, I see Marty did it too. Oh, so actually it's already there. I don't need to do this job twice. I think now it would be okay to move people into the breakout sessions then.
Alrighty, so we're going to move you into 16 different breakout rooms. Try and remember your number so when we call you back. And Brianne, 20 minutes in the breakout room. What are we looking at time-wise?
No, that sounds good. 20 minutes is fine. I
Okay,
think that I did go over.
okay, here you go.